All right, everybody. Welcome back to Gridiron Gang, a Detroit News Lions podcast. It is week one, folks. We are fired up. We're talking week one. We're talking season preview. We're talking everything as it relates to your Detroit Lions. A Micah Parsons trade to the Green Bay Packers. What does that mean for this team? We're going to talk about it all on today's preview episode. But before we get to all that, I'm Nolan Bianchi. With me, as always, is my partner in crime, Richard Silva. Richard, I'm trying to think of the Fox News so we can we can do the little singing along with the jingles or the Fox song, but it's not coming to me at the
I'm bad at differentiating between that CBS and was it ABC or whoever the other one is, ESPN maybe. I'm bad at differentiating the jingles, but we made it. We have made it here. Jingle remembrance or not, it is week one, and I'm
jingle all the way.
Yeah, jingle all the way. It's week one, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, let's start at the top with some season predictions because we're going to talk about the Packers game. There's so much to discuss, surrounding that team in general and what some recent moves that they made mean for the Lions' chances of repeating as NFC North champions. But Rich and I, earlier today, we filed our season predictions to DetroitNews.com, so go check those out. You get to see what Bob Wanowski and John Neo, our heralded columnists, think about the Lions season as well. But Richard, what was your prediction for this team? Because I know you and I, around the time of the schedule release, we made some predictions, and I think there were some things that changed, namely Frank Ragnow retiring, and maybe you and I came on this podcast and said, I don't know, I think about this team a little different now. But personally, now that we've gone through all of it, now that we've gone through training camp, now that we've gone through the preseason games, we know what the 53-man roster looks like. I don't really know that my opinion has changed all that much from when the schedule was released initially.
I'm right there with you. I was 11 wins in May when we initially did our little predictions, and I'm in 11 wins now. I think that's the over on whatever over-under win total Vegas has for the Lions. I think it's 9.5 if I'm not mistaken, or maybe 10.5. Regardless, I have them going over at 11-6, and we had to pick in our predictions how far we think they're going to go in the playoffs, and I said the NFC Championship game, but I added the caveat, I hedged a little bit that, hey, man, like once you get to the Final Four, like really any of those four teams are capable of winning the Super Bowl. It would just, I picked them maybe to come up one game short of the Super Bowl. But again, you get to that point, anything is possible. And we'll talk a little bit about would that be a successful season for the Lions or not? But you get your prediction off, and then we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I ended up right where I started at 12-5. I mean, we've been doing all these different preview series, the Detroit News, over the last couple of days, and I've been working on the defensive preview, and we pretty much know what the Lions' offense is going to be. Obviously, there are some big unknowns with John Morton coming in and Frank Ragnow retiring, but those are really the only two things I think in this entire team that give me pause about how they'll perform relative to last season. Defensively, obviously, there's some concerns maybe with the edge depth, with maybe some of the safety depth that they have back there. But I think by and large, this is a team that's out for vengeance. This is a defense that's out for vengeance because they were firing on all cylinders last season. They were one of the best defenses in the league. I think like DVOA after week 9 or something like that, if you're into the super advanced analytics, like they through the halfway point of the season, had the same offensive and defensive DVOA that was like comparable to the undefeated Patriots. And I think people kind of forgot that they were that good at the beginning of the year. Well, you take that team, you take that unit, and you pretty much bring every single one of them back. The only guy that they didn't bring back, they have 10 returning starters if you count Lee McNeil, who we are going to count for these purposes because he's still on the team. He's just not maybe going to be able to play the first half of the season. But if you look at the entire starting group, they only lost one player, Carlton Davis. And guess what they did? They replaced him with pretty much an exactly identical player in terms of like production and caliber or however you want to frame it. And so I look at this defense and I'm thinking, man, I know we're expecting a little bit of regression from the 15-2 win team a season ago, but this team was historically dominant through the first half of the season. I don't think it was a fluke. And I really do think at the end of the day, they were due for some regression to the mean. They played a lot of not great teams. They had the AFC South in the schedule, yada, yada, yada. But I just feel like this has potential to be a better team than what we saw in the back half of last season. I would expect them to be a better all-around team than we saw last season. So 12-5 is where I'm landing on this prediction. And I think that they're going to at least reach the NFC Championship. Like I think I said, win the NFC Championship in our predictions, but again, kind of to your point. Once you get to that point, it's all a little bit of a crapshoot. So right. I could have said Super Bowl. I could have said lose the NFC Championship. I don't really know what would cause me to go a specific way or another on that front. So at the end of the day, 12-5. I like this team.
The playoffs are a different season. You know, it's like Dan Campbell. Yeah. Just get in. Just be one of the whatever it is now 14 teams that get in, and then figure it out when you get there. Figure out a way to win 4 or 3 games in a row if you get the 1 seed. To your point about the defense, I agree that if the offense, and I do expect the offense to take some level of step back, not even like, I'm not saying they're going to be like out of the top 10, but they, both in terms of yards and points and pretty much every measurable since the midway point of 2022, were the best offense in football. I just don't think changing out a coordinator, they could have hired anybody. And I don't think I would have felt comfortable saying, yeah, that team is going to continue being the number 1 offense. Maybe it's the number 3 offense. And, you know, it's not the biggest step back in the world, but the defense, and this all hinges on health, which we've talked about for the past 6 months. I do expect a step forward from the defense for the entire length of the season. And because of that, I think that will cover any small step back that might be coming from the offense. And I've had this kind of like, not even a take, like, I don't believe it, but I've kicked it around in my head like a few times where I'm like, is there a world this season where the defense is better than the offense? And I'm like, no. Like, it was just a
really?
it was just a thought exercise that I had where I was like, in like midway through training camp when the defense was kind of kicking butt, and I was like, man, like, is that possible? And then like I convinced myself, I was like, no, like it's not possible. But maybe there's like a 5% chance.
5% is way too low for me. I think I'm assuming the defense is going to be better than the offense for the reasons you just listed. Like if I had to bet, it's not super strong in the defensive side, but I think what we've seen in training camp, like you just brought it up, the defense was kicking butt for the entirety of camp. And, you know, obviously it's all of that should be taken with a grain of salt. You know, they're trying stuff out. They're trying to get into situations. Sometimes a situation is particularly advantageous for the defense, and we just write it down like, hey, here's what happened. And, you know, so we try to add context as we're going through those things. But I think generally speaking, I left most days in Allen Park this summer going, the defense is better than the offense today. And I think if you just look at this team, this roster, especially the starting group, you know, you want to talk about the depth, things get a little bit iffy, but I think that's most teams across the league. But you have a top 5 edge rusher, Nathan Hutchinson. You have a guy who is pretty good when healthy. And that's always a caveat with Marcus Davenport. But that edge group, I think, is really, really strong. That's probably top 7 in the league. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head there, but you got Hutchinson, who kind of holds a lot of the weight there. And then you have Davenport, who, when healthy, has been good. The interior line group, I like a lot, even without Ali McNeil maybe being ready for the start of the season. But DJ Reader and Tyleek Williams, I thought, had really good camps. DJ Reader specifically, I don't know if we talked about that enough throughout camp of just how good and consistent he was. That's huge because he didn't get a training camp last year. Your linebackers, they're all healthy. You added, I think that linebacking crew, not only is it going to benefit from an extra year of development from Jack Campbell, from Derek Barnes, from Malcolm Rodriguez when he gets back healthy, but I think the players that they changed out on the back end are even better or have a chance to be more impactful than some of the bottom of the roster guys were last season. Now, obviously, a lot of those guys ended up starting games, so that might be a hard statement to make. But then on the back end, you got the best safety duo in the league combined with DJ Reed, who's a very, very good cornerback, and Taron Arnold, who, from everything that we saw, from everything that everybody said about him, is due for like a significant step forward last year. I think it's likely that this team has a better defense and offense.
I saw Kelvin Shepard did an interview recently with, I think it's Believe in Lions. It's hosted by Glover Quinn and Trevor Thompson. And they asked him who has made the biggest step forward on defense, obviously, in training camp. And Shep said, you guys got to let me know when you're going to release this episode because I got to make sure to curse him out that day so he doesn't get too high on himself. But he said Terrion Arnold. And he said, you know, if I don't keep him in check, Terrion's going to be running around the building saying, "Shep said I'm CB1." So yes, I do agree with you that they are in position to be very good, and yeah, we'll see. Again, like I said, it hinges on health, but that's kind of a separate conversation. We're talking about what we know to be true right now. What do you think of successful season? Oh, I'm sorry.
And I think that's kind of true for everybody. I think the reason why it seems like a specific caveat for this team is because they just had a bunch of injuries. And this is something I've been debating about or thinking about all season. I published a piece today where I'm taking an optimistic and a pessimistic, approach to three different big storylines. I talked about the health of the defense and the edge group and the depth and stuff like that. So I just feel like it's not a certainty that the health is going to get better. I think it won't be historic levels of attrition on the defensive side of the ball like it was last year, but I keep hanging on to what Rod Wood said to us at owners meetings when we asked him, "Hey, did you ever figure out what was the root cause of this?" And he said, didn't even say it was bad luck. He might have said it was bad luck, but for the most part, the conclusion was it's just the style of defense that we play. And part of me just wonders, is there concern about maybe that happening again? I think it's somewhat fair to wonder about it. But I just want to throw that out about the health because it was such a big issue last year.
I think the manner in which they play is a net positive, but I think a negative that comes with it is that. So I agree.
Yeah. All right. You brought it up just a second ago. What does a successful season look like for the 2025 Detroit Lions?
I think we both agree that nothing. Okay, I don't want to say the regular season doesn't matter. It obviously does. But if we're at the, a year from now, looking back on the 2025 season, we're going to say whether or not it was successful based on what does or does not happen in the playoffs. They won 15 games last year and then they lost in that divisional round. And I think, if you ask most Lions fans, they'll say that last season was a failure. I think if you ask most Lions players, they'll say last season was a failure. So it depends what happens in the playoffs. With that said, the easy answer is, win the Super Bowl. And that should be, I think, at this point in year 5 with the roster that they have, that should be the expectation, both internally and externally. With that said, I don't think any sort of deep playoff run, if they made it to the conference title game and lost to Philly or the Rams or another Washington, another contender that exists. I don't think that necessarily in a big picture sense, and it'll hurt, and players and fans will be upset. But I don't think in a big picture sense that's necessarily a failure because winning 11 games and getting to the conference title game, at least to me, proves or it gives an answer to all the questions that people have. Can the Lions maintain their success without Ben Johnson, without Aaron Glenn, without Frank Ragnow? And if they win 11 games and make the conference title game, it's a resounding yes. So I think that could still be a successful season. But, of course, it's Super Bowl or bust.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I'm right there with you. And I feel like there's two levels of disappointment, right? There's the disappointment of not achieving what all 32 teams are set out to do. And then, 2 years ago when they went to the conference title game, it was it's disappointed that they lost, but uber successful season on the whole. I'm completely with you. I think anything short of an NFC championship game appearance, I would even say anything short of an NFC championship game win is going to be highly disappointing. But I think one thing that's interesting, and you and I have talked about this maybe on the podcast over the course of the offseason, but I just think last season and the way that it ended was such a shock to the system and such a reality check to this idea that they are going to win a Super Bowl.
It was it was the first time that the roller coaster went down instead of going up, in the past 3 years.
Yep, and I hate to be a Debbie Downer on the week 1 of the NFL season. We're talking about hope here, folks. But I just think about how many years the Ravens have been at it with Lamar Jackson. How many years the Cowboys have won the NFC East and not even gone to the conference championship game. How many years the Buffalo Bills have had the best team in football and didn't win the conference championship game. How many years all of these teams, the Packers with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, great teams for 40 years straight, 2 Super Bowls. Now, people in this town would kill for that kind of success, but at the end of the day, it's not guaranteed. You can have all the pieces in place, all the coaching, all the players, everything. And it's just probably going to come down to a few lucky breaks that may or may not go your way.
That's why I don't love making like playoff predictions, because it's like you said, it's if you predict that a team is not going to win the Super Bowl, you're probably right. Like it, you know what I mean? Like if you're down,
Yeah.
if you're down on the Lions and you don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl, the Lions are probably not going to win the Super Bowl. Like if we're just talking probability, like it's a 1 in 32 shot, and of course they're in the upper echelon, so it's not quite 1 in 32. But yeah, no, it's a lot of it comes down to chance. A lot of it comes down to luck. It really does have to be a perfect storm, I think, to win a Super Bowl. But yeah, no, it's that's why that when people make the argument like the all-in trades, like trading for a guy like Myles Garrett or whatever, even if you trade for a guy like Myles Garrett, you are going to have the best defense in football because of those two pass rushers, and potentially the best offense in football still. But it's still no guarantee that you would win the Super Bowl. And now all of a sudden you shut out years on the back end, 2 to 3 years in the future that you would have had an opportunity.
Yeah, but I think you can live with it. I think if you go all in, like I understand what they're trying to do and build a contender, and in no way could they have afforded Micah Parsons or a player of that caliber. But I think you can live with not winning it if you went for it. And that's something that, like, watching a lot of these Tigers teams growing up, 2009 or 2006 to, let's call it 2014, 15, they were really, really good. And they sold every minor leaguer they could to get guys who could win right now. And does that make it easier in hindsight? I don't know. 10 years down the road, I don't really know. But gosh dang it, they tried. And I don't know. I guess that's just what you have to weigh. Like that's a decision that comes from the front office of, like, what can I live with years down the road? Can I live with doing it the right way, having 3 bites at the apple with a team that maybe wasn't at its absolute peak relative to other teams in the league? Or would you rather have 1 or 2 bites at the apple with the resounding best team in the league? Because that happens too. Like Philly, I think going into the playoffs last year, despite the fact that they didn't win as soon as they played that game, maybe I'm wrong. I'm changing my opinion in my head here, but I feel like they felt like the best team towards the end of the season in the NFC. They had the defense, they had Saquon, they had a game that could win in the playoffs. And I don't know. I feel the same way about the Chiefs every year. Like, it feels obvious that they're going to do it, and then they do it. And maybe that's only because we've seen them do it before. And I think that plays into this too, but I don't know. I feel like when those teams exist, the 49ers from 2 years ago that lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, when those super teams exist, they have a legitimate chance, always.
I would argue that I would be fine living with, the Lions have done this 2 years now where they've been contenders. If the Lions are contenders for 3 more years, or maybe 4 if Jared Goff ages really well, and if I'm a Lions fan, I can live with the fact that we had 6 tries to win a Super Bowl. And, maybe we did or did not get one, but they had 6 tries.
But what if the pass rush stinks this year, right? And everybody knows the pass rush stinks.
If Aiden's healthy.
Right, sure. But all right, well, let's pick another thing. I don't really know another position to pick. Let's just say the pass rush.
Exactly, because the roster's great.
Right. I agree with that. But let's just say the pass rush is not good. Aiden's doing his job. And actually, I mean, they had Aiden Hutchinson playing really well a couple years ago, and didn't really help the pass rush as a whole. So it's still possible that is the case this season, depending on how the injury situation shakes out opposite of him. But are you okay with being like, man, this team's really good, but the pass rush, arguably the most important part of playing defense, just isn't good enough, and we can all see it coming from a mile away, and they have a really good team, and if everything goes right, they can overcome that deficiency, and maybe they get to go to the playoffs for an extra year on the back end, like you were just saying. Is that worth it? To me, screw that extra year on the back end. The time is now. The future is not guaranteed. We might all wake up dead tomorrow.
Are you okay with Brian Branch signing with the Los Angeles Chargers and becoming a Hall of Fame player for them instead of you?
If it gets you closer to a Super Bowl right now, yes.
I would argue Brian Branch. I'd rather have Brian Branch for 4 years than Myles Garrett for 2.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
I don't think so. The best pass rusher in the league for 2 years instead of a safety for 4?
Potentially, and I say 4 just because that's the length of
Take
a
it
contract.
back.
No, I say 4 because that's like the standard length of a contract. But I'd argue Branch's ceiling is the best safety in the league. And
But what can help you win the Super Bowl?
Brian Branch.
Not more than Myles Garrett.
And it's not just Branch.
You could have you playing back there if you have Myles Garrett and Aiden Hutchinson rushing the passer next to each other.
You could have me playing back there right now. This is it's a conversation that's been had by me, you, and everyone else who talks about the Detroit Lions this offseason when Trey Hendrickson and Parsons and all these players were available. But shall we move on to the Packers?
Well, we should actually just move right on to Micah Parsons because we'll get to that before we get to the Packers. Does this change? So Micah Parsons traded to the Packers for 2 first-round picks and Kenny Clark. Immediately, Green Bay signs him to a 4-year, $47 million or 4-year, $47 million per year contract with, I think it was something in the $136 million guaranteed or something like that. And around the NFL, it has dramatically changed the way that people are looking at this NFC North title race.
Yeah, I think what's scary about him is that the Packers, they didn't blitz a lot last year, and they still had a good pass rush despite that. I think it was like 17% last year that they blitzed, which was second lowest in the league. Obviously, like diametrically opposed to the Lions, who, especially after the injuries, Aaron Glenn was just like, cover zero, because he didn't really have much of a choice. But despite that, they still had 45 sacks. They were still 8th most in the league in sacks. So their guys up front just won. And it was very well rounded. It was the Rashawn Garys, the Wyatts of the world. And then now you add potentially the best defender in the NFL, at least the top 5 defender in the NFL, because of his versatility. Using the Myles Garrett example, I think Myles Garrett is a better pass rusher, but Micah Parsons does 90% of that pass rush and other stuff, which is what makes him so dangerous. So yeah, it is really scary. I think the odds did shift, right? The Packers are now the favorite to win the division.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, obviously it changed things, but we'll have to see.
Does it change how you look at the division race?
I'm still gonna pick the Lions to win it. But again, I've got the Lions at 11 wins and the Packers not too far off at 10 or 11. It would come to tiebreakers at that point. They are the top 2. I think I was a little bit didn't know where to go between Minnesota and Green Bay in the 2-3 slot. I think it's clear to me now it is Green Bay in the 2, and they're closer to 1 than they are 3.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I at the end of the day, still think the Lions are the better team. And really, when I go through this schedule, I think the Lions are better than most teams that they're going to play this season. And obviously environment and the type of game is going to factor into it. And they're going to lose some games that maybe they should have won, or, games that they were expected to win. Yeah. The Bucs game is a perfect example of that. They come out, they beat the Rams in this super high energy week 1 game. Then they come back in week 2, play at 1:00 and lose to a team who ended up, win their division and stuff like that. But
I say that to say they were 1-7 in the red zone. Like, they were in position to win the game and they just didn't.
Yeah. Ultimately, I do think this makes Green Bay a lot better team. But I do think, while I do think the Lions are going to still win the division, it would not surprise me in the slightest to see Green Bay win the division. I do think, by and large, Vikings down here, Chicago, we'll see, but probably down here. So,
the thing with Green Bay is this is the 3rd year in a row now that they're the youngest team in football, if I'm not mistaken. So we're waiting for not just the Jordan Love jump, but for the jump, the Packers jump from everyone, from all of these young players. And now you infuse Parsons into it. Like, it could happen this year. I heard, I'm pretty sure I heard John Gruden talking about this, that I think Jordan Love is 27. Rodgers won his at 27. Like, it could just happen. Like, it could, we have these notions of who Jordan Love is, and he's this erratic quarterback with these really high highs, and then he'll make these not great decisions. You saw it in the game in Green Bay when he handed Kirby Joseph a touchdown. But it also could just change. Like, he also could just be incredible, and yeah, they could win 15 games this year.
I agree, and I know you've talked about it. Of from a incredible throws standpoint, Jordan Love has made some more incredible throws than anybody you've ever seen. But I think he's too crazy to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback at this stage of his career. And like you said, that could all change this season. Maybe he gets it under control, stops making those boneheaded plays. Matthew Stafford did it. Like I think there's a lot of Matthew Stafford in his game where he's like, yeah, I can do it. When I play CFB 26, there's a lot of me and Jordan Love where it's like, dude, you're gonna check it down, or you're gonna be a hero and a legend forever. And I can't help myself. I can't check it down. But I think Jordan Love, until he proves that he's not erratic like that, and also, I mean, they beat Dallas in that 2023 season. Mm-hmm. We haven't really seen it from them, and that's not a prerequisite. You don't have to go to a Super Bowl before you can win one, or go to an NFC Championship game before you can win one. But I just feel like he hasn't really had that many tests in his career, and like those kind of milestone moments outside of that one playoff win against the Cowboys. And that's not necessarily his fault, of course, but that's one of the guys who I think very highly of from a talent standpoint. But as far as being able to put it all together in a way that is conducive to winning a Super Bowl, I don't believe just yet.
And I think you'll live with some of the erratic play, because I mean, some of the best quarterbacks in not just today's NFL and all-time NFL have played erratically. But if he is going to be that erratic, it has to come with an equal, if not greater, amount of the special plays. Where I think back in 2023, he had 37 big-time throws. It's per PFF, and it's a throw down the field into a small window, a special type throw. He had 37 of them, and he only had 17 last year. So, and he kind of still was that same, I keep using the word erratic, but that same, like, he might gift the other team a touchdown, but he had 20 less of these, oh my goodness, like, I don't know how many other people on the planet can make that throw. So I think you can live with some of it. It just also has to come with the really high highs, and last year it did not.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at this Sunday's game. We're starting with a look at the lines. Packers -2.5, over under 47.5 implied score, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 for the Packers and 22.5 for the Lions. I'm taking the Lions in this game. I just feel like I don't want to say they own Lambeau, but I think that they elevate their play whenever they go there. And I started to take last season that I'm just going to cling on to until I don't believe it's true anymore, and that's that Dan Campbell owns Matt LaFleur.
Maybe I'm lame for this, but I think when there's trends and the Lions have won 3 in Lambeau, I'm not going to try to get cute and be like, oh, they're due. I think I'm going to pick the Lions in Lambeau until they show me a reason to not pick the Lions in Lambeau. So I agree with you that I'm taking the Lions.
Right. Well, it went the other way for 25 years where it was like, well, I haven't seen it, so can't pick them to do it. And then all of a sudden they won one year, and then they won like 2 years later. And then all of a sudden that's just not a problem anymore. It really, and it was the 2022 game to end the season where they had won in Lambeau before, I think with Matt Patricia as a head coach. So that doesn't even count. Like, they were a bad team. I don't think the Packers are playing their starters, all that stuff. So that doesn't really count for me. But then once they did it in 2022, I was like, okay, now it's done. I'm a big like curse guy, They were cursed at Lambeau Field, and then they had to remove the curse, and now they're good to go. And anything can happen now. Yeah, but now I think, to your point, the pendulum has swung the other way, where the Packers are a little bit cursed whenever they play the Lions.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I usually don't like the conversations about, especially when you're talking about like a player or a coach, like they can't win the big one. Like people say, like, oh, like Jared Goff wilts in like the biggest moments. Mm-hmm. He's been to a Super Bowl, been to 2 conference title games, and been to a Super Bowl. Or like they say, Ryan Day can't win the big one, and then he eventually does. Or like Kirby can't win the big one, and then eventually he does, and now he's like got this powerhouse in Georgia. So I usually don't like when people are like, oh, like we haven't seen this, so this. But I think for things like this, like there is a like mentality or like a mentality change to it where like the Lions have every reason. Amon-Ra St. Brown has every reason to roll into Green Bay as confident as like anybody on planet Earth, because they're like, we've done this 3 years in a row. So I do think that plays a part to it, that like the psyche.
Yeah, and I think that's what was holding the Lions back all those years, that they couldn't win. I think right now you see the Lions playing to win and the Packers playing maybe not to lose. And I can't think of any specific examples of them playing not to lose, but I get that vibe from these two teams
for sure.
So, and it used to be the other way. Micah Parsons, is he going to play? this Sunday? What are we thinking?
I would, if I had to choose, I'd bet he played, but that's just a hunch more than anything. Schefter reported that he wants to, but apparently he might have to get an epidural or not subdue, to subside the pain during the game for a sprained back, which is kind of crazy to me. Like it, assuming that all those reports are accurate, and I have no reason to believe they're not. Like, if I'm the Packers and I just gave this guy 180 some odd $1 million, and you need an epidural for a back injury to play, hey man, sit out a month. Like this is a 4-year deal. Like I think that if he has to take that to numb the pain, that would be concerning for me if I'm a Packers fan.
Not only that, but things get a little bit interesting with their schedule because it's pretty similar to the Lions actually. But we're probably going to get into the playoffs, so like, chill. Not even like over the course of this deal is what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about just this season specifically. I think he can sit out one of these games. But again, this game could end up being the deciding factor in the division winner. So
I do think he is dangerous if he does play. And I mentioned that versatility earlier because, this is the third career start for Christian Mahogany, the first for Tate Ratledge. And he is a player that doesn't have to live on the edge. So like, if they want to attack that youth, it's Graham Glasgow's first game back at center since he'd done it a couple of years ago. I think he filled in once last year when Frank hurt his pec. If they want to attack that interior, I think Micah is a guy that can do that. So he is like, it is, obviously it is significant. The All-Pro pass rusher is significant, an inflection point in the game, but it really is true.
The guy who has finished top 3 in Defensive Player of the Year 3 out of the 4 seasons that he's been in the league.
Yeah,
strong take, Silva. Strong take. The
guy who only 4 players have more sacks than since he came into the league.
And who are those players?
It's Myles Garrett, T.J. Watt, Troy Hendrickson, and Nick Bosa. Parsons got
off the dome.
Parsons got 52.5, and the rest of the guys have 60 or fewer. Garrett's up at 60, and everyone else is in between.
In his 2 career games against the Lions, because the Lions seemingly play the Cowboys every year. And that's what was funny about talking to Hank Fraley, the Lions offensive line coach, about this. And he's like, everybody's like, oh, like, how are you going to game plan for Micah Parsons? He's like, well, we played him 2 years in a row, and we're going to have to play him later this year anyway. So
yeah. He brought that up about Kenny Clark as well. He was like, everyone's talking about like, Packers got Parsons, but at least Kenny Clark's out of the division. And he's like, well, now you play him in week 9 instead of week 1.
Yeah. So in 2 career games against the Lions, Micah Parsons has 12 tackles, 10 pressures, and 2 sacks. Pretty good. I mean, decent stat line. A sack per game is always good, but nothing insane.
He missed last year's game during that beatdown that was in Dallas, the 47-9 game. That got ugly very quickly.
Yeah. What can you tell me about the Packers defense on the whole, outside of Micah Parsons?
So I think it's what I said, and it's the second year of Halfley as the defensive coordinator. And I mentioned it earlier, just that the drop 7, sit back, let the front win, and guys that are trending up, the Edgerrin Coopers of the world, that I think of anybody in the NFC North that is trending up, I think he's got to. He's on the short list of guys, the linebacker there. So it is, it's a scary unit. I think they finished 6th in both points and yards allowed last year, per game in total, obviously. So yeah, it's scary. They lost Jair Alexander, but they add Nate Hobbs. They add Isaiah Simmons, and also Bo Melton is now, instead of a receiver, is now a corner. He's the guy that Brian Branch got ejected for hitting last year. That guy is now a cornerback on these Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, and the Jair loss is obviously significant, but I feel like, hasn't been on the field in like a year and a half, 2 years. So
they had already lost him, basically.
Yeah, he was. I don't think he played in either game last season. So, yeah. Long story short, the Lions should #run the ball against the Packers this Sunday, and I think they're. Like, for all the, worry about the offensive line and stuff like that, I do think that running the ball is the area that they're going to be fine in. And I think, I'm so intrigued to see what year 3 Jahmyr Gibbs looks like, because he took such a big step from year 1 to year 2. Some of it was necessitated by David Montgomery having an injury towards the end of the season. But I think with this team and the way that they kind of split up the carries over the course of training camp, I think we're kind of looking at him as a guy who is going to do even more this season, which I think is very, very enticing. But this could also be a game where David Montgomery comes into play because, maybe they're not looking to hit all these home runs. They're just looking to, single, double, single, whatever, and try and control the clock and all that stuff. So it's not just a matter of trying to rip touchdowns. The Detroit Lions won't play touchdown machine. This is also a game where you're probably going to want to control the clock and keep the ball out of Jared Goff's hands as much as possible.
Yeah, 100%. I think running is the path to winning for this team on Sunday.
Top tier analysis here. They got to run the ball. They got to stop the run. Let's talk about the offense.
It's not always the case.
No, it was just funny the way.
Yeah. Like, for instance, they thought their best way to beat the Bucs last year was to throw it 55 times, and it didn't work. But
that's true.
They are willing.
Yeah, avoid Vita Vea. That was their game plan against the Buccaneers last year. The offense as a whole, I think really interesting addition for the Packers this offseason with their first-round wide receiver, Matthew Golden. The Packers haven't had a first-round wide receiver drafted in 23 years. And I've been historically very down on the Packers receiving core. Not that I don't think that they have good players there, but I also just get annoyed when everybody's like, oh my gosh, this guy could be wide receiver one. Oh, no, Dontavion Wicks actually could be the next wide receiver one. Oh, no, Romeo Doubs could be the next wide receiver. Oh, Jaden Reed. No, Jaden Reed definitely going to be the next wide receiver one. They're not that good. Yeah, they're good. They're good players, but none of them were dominant, and I would get frustrated watching people have these conversations about Dontavion Wicks, eyeball emojis, what hashtag wide receiver one, rocket up. They weren't that good. Matthew Golden, however, is that good. He was fantastic at Texas last year. Turned it on when the lights were brightest. I think his two best games were in the SEC championship against Georgia. He had something like 140-something yards. And then in the college football playoff quarterfinal, I want to say, against Arizona State, he had something in the neighborhood of 160 with a touchdown. So when the lights were on, he was fantastic. And from all accounts coming out of Packers camp, he looks really, really good. So I think that is probably the one big thing that jumps out to me in terms of additions on this offense.
Yeah. What about Tucker Kraft, wide receiver one?
Yeah. Tucker Kraft, wide receiver one. Luke Musgrave, maybe even. Why don't we throw him into the conversation?
Scotty Montgomery, who is obviously now coaching receivers, you asked him this question a couple days ago about Matthew Golden, and when the Lions and him were scouting receivers ahead of the draft, what did he like about Golden? And I thought it was interesting hearing him talk about it, that basically the first thing he mentioned was that speed, but then he also mentioned kind of the acumen that he has, to catch it and tuck it quickly, basically saying really good after the catch. And he thinks that guys who, I think he said basically pluck it and tuck it is what he calls it, pluck it and go. Guys who can do that are your best rack guys, which, it sounds simple, catching the ball, tucking it away, and getting upfield. But we see obviously with guys like Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown, there is a skill to it, and Scotty did mention that rack ability for Golden.
Another big offseason addition for the Packers is guard Aaron Banks. He signed from the San Francisco 49ers. Is that right?
Yep.
So he kind of fills out their offensive line depth. Any opportunities, do you think, for the Lions to kind of feast on this group, or are they pretty formidable at this point, do you think?
Yeah, I think feast maybe is the wrong word, because I think I would say the same things about the Lions offensive line, where I don't know if I'd say any of them are primed to be feasted. Perhaps, if there is both strong rosters, if there is an area to take advantage of, it would be that on both sides, because Glasgow is moving from guard to center. The Packers are doing the same thing. They lose Josh Myers, who was their starting center for the past few years, and now they move Elton Jenkins over from guard to center. So kind of similar offensive line. I don't even want to call them issues, fluxes, similar offensive lines in flux and being shuffled. We talked about that previously, that kind of the whole NFC North went through that, with the Bears retooling theirs and then the Vikings subbing out they pulled their three interior guys out from
year,
and then injected the Colts plus Donovan Jackson from Ohio State.
Yeah.
But on the Packers specifically, I think, if there is an area, just like I mentioned with the Lions, if there is an area that an opposing defense coordinator would like to attack, I think that might be one, the interior.
And then, outside of the passing game, all the guys we just mentioned, who is there anybody who's not going to be playing in this weekend's game? I know Christian Watson is still out with his torn ACL. Is there any other receivers who we are expecting to not play on Sunday?
Not that I'm aware of. Watson was the only one.
Okay, so as much as I was just clowning them to some degree, they do have a lot of weapons on this team. They do have a lot of weapons at running back too. Josh Jacobs was fantastic last year after coming over from Las Vegas. I don't think Marshawn Lloyd is going to be ready for the season opener. I think he actually started the season on IR, so we'll see how that develops there. But then, lost AJ Dillon, who did not play last season. They lost Josh Myers, just like you said. So, anything else about this Packers offense that we're interested in looking at?
No, other than that, like I think we talk about them because they made the Parsons deal. I was like they like really like shuffled some stuff. They're kind of in the same on both sides, similar to the Lions in the sense of like they're returning like 18, 19 starters from last year. They lose Myers, they lose Alexander, who like you mentioned, like he only played in 7 games apiece the last 2 seasons, so I hesitate to even call him a full-time starter. But they lose Myers and they lose, not not much else other than that. So they're returning most of their most of their core pieces, despite the headline being they traded Kenny Clark for Micah Parsons. They're still that continuity that the Lions talk about is also true about Green Bay.
And then also around the NFC North this weekend, there's 2 divisional matchups. So the Lions and Packers are on Sunday, 4:25 on Fox. And then on Monday night, that'll be the Bears and the Vikings, where we'll see Ben Johnson's head coaching debut. You excited for that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see how it goes. Who are you going to pick in that one, Vikings or Bears?
I can't remember. I think I picked the Vikings. Let me check.
I know I would for sure pick the Vikings if it was just a straight up pick, but given the spread, because obviously we make our weekly picks at the Detroit News, it's Vikings -1.5, and I chose the Vikings.
I think I chose the Bears.
I think you did because we disagreed.
Yeah, well, that makes sense if you chose the Vikings. All right, what else do we got to talk about before we move on here? Anything else with the Lions season as a whole that you're kind of interested in talking about? They did add a couple of guys since we last talked. They filled out the practice squad with Andre Carter, edge rusher from Army. He played significant snaps with the Minnesota Vikings in his rookie season, not as crucial of a piece, let's say, with the Las Vegas Raiders last season, but he fills out the practice squad, and then the Lions filled out their 53-man roster. They signed 2 safeties, who's Thomas Harper and Daniel Thomas. Mm-hmm. Daniel Thomas. Yeah, look at that. Look at that.
If you had to choose, because I've already thought about this, so I could talk about it. If you had to choose your guesses for the 2 practice squad elevations, do you have any names that are screaming at you?
Oh man,
because I feel confident about mine. I'm gonna pick Tom Kennedy because I'm never gonna pick against a Tom Kennedy Week 1 practice squad elevation. And then secondly, I'm gonna pick Isaac Ukwu because maybe Tyrus Wheat needs a little bit more time to get up to speed. You only have 4 edge guys if you include Wheat, and of course some guys that could play on the inside out. But I'm going to pick Kennedy, and I'm going to pick Ukwu because they have shown willing to elevate Ukwu. They did it twice last year against Dallas and against Minnesota. So we'll see on Saturday what they do. But those are my 2 picks.
Are we sure that they're elevating a receiver? So the one thing we should touch on is Isaac TeSlaa missed practice the other day. Sent fear into the hearts of every Detroiter. But turns out it's just a little bug. He's not feeling great. So Dan Campbell saying on 97.1 this morning that he's back in the building. He'll be all good. Just dealing with a little bit of sickness.
Yeah, no, we're not sure that they'll elevate another receiver. Like I said, I'm picking Tom Kennedy just because Tom Kennedy and Week 1 elevations go together like, iced tea on a hot day.
Yeah. You couldn't even pick 2 foods that go together because you don't like food. I'm gonna go Dan Skipper just for the sake of it, and let me see here. I think Isaac Ukwu is a good pick because I at the end of the day, I still don't feel good about this edge depth, and I feel like so many of Brad Holmes' moves have been like good and smart and really calculated. Yeah. And the situation that they're going into with the edge group is kind of insane to me. Like your edge 4 right now, Tyrus Wheat, we just talked about, 7 career pressures. Al-Quadi Muhammad, good player. Came over, had, I think, 24 pressures and 3 sacks in 9 games. Pretty good, but nothing to write home about. And I understand that it's really hard to get 3 of those guys in the same room and you already have 2, but kind of going back to our conversation earlier, it feels like, dude, just do something. Whether it be Zadarius Smith, like pay Zadarius Smith. And I think that's actually a good example of what we were talking about earlier. You pay Zadarius Smith $6 to $8 million, let's say. And you can't sign who on the back end? I don't know. That's a move that's worth it. Like, I understand you're trying to save tokens for the future, but adding a player with the productivity of Zadarius Smith is a move that can get you to the Super Bowl. It's a move that can take you over the top.
Well, I think that's the happy medium, right? I think we both agree that without having the entire cap book in front of us and without having all the knowledge that the front office obviously does, I think me and you both agree that that is the happy medium between making a trade for a guy that will command 35, 40, $45 million versus a Darius Smith that, is going to come at a much less steep price than that.
Anything that came up while you were doing so, we're going to be dropping by the time you're listening to this, we'll be just a few hours away from dropping our full offensive and defensive previews. They're going to be absolutely loaded, so go check it out. There's never been a better time to subscribe to the Detroit News. Anything else that stood out to you while you were writing that piece that you wanted to talk about from the offensive side of the ball?
Not quite. We talked about the big picture stuff. We'll get into more of the nitty gritty on that, which, I encourage everyone to read it, please. We touched on the big picture stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we can go to our blind ranking. It's a quick episode today, I gotta say.
Yeah, I think 45
Very
minutes
efficient.
for an hour is the sweet spot, and maybe this will take a few minutes here. It is Nolan's turn for the blind rankings, and we've only been doing this. This is the 3rd week now that we've been doing it. So if you don't know what we're doing, basically I pick a category. The first week it was wide receivers that I did since like 2010 or whatever I said, and I made a list. And Megatron was on the list, Anquan Bolden was on the list. Jameson Williams was on the list, and 2 other guys that are slipping my brain right now. But I give those names to Nolan one at a time, and he does not know who's coming next, and he has to try to attempt to rank those players 1 through 5. So last week it was his turn to provide names. He did running backs. He kind of had me in a bind 2 through 4. It was Jamal Williams, it was Reggie Bush, and it was, who was the other running back that I can't remember off the top of my head? DeAndre Swift. And I felt kind of okay with how I ended up ranking those, but I also understand the debate of why not. It is now Nolan's turn to rank. I have pass rushers from the Jim Schwartz era to present. So between the last, whatever that is, 15-ish years. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. The first name that I'm giving you is Cliff Averill.
Cliff Averill. Cliff Averill comes to mind because the thing I remember from him is Christmas Eve 2011, driving to church with my family during the Lions clinching game to make the playoffs for the first time since I've been alive. And I'm pretty sure he made like the game sealing sack, and I'll never forget the call from Dan Miller. Like, I don't remember the call specifically, but I'll never forget like that. Dan Miller making the call, being like, "They're going back to the playoffs. They're going back to the playoffs." That is something that I will never forget. And he ended up going on to Seattle and having a pretty good career. I would say he was. I think he like kind of took the next step in his career once he got to Seattle and was part of some really, really good defenses there. Got a Super Bowl. Great player. I'm gonna go, but I think you're. I think I can think of some other ones that are better. So I'm gonna put him number 4.
4, okay. Usually 3 is the safe one for the first one. It's funny, Cliff Averill. As an outsider who grew up in New York, it's funny. Like, I remember him mostly as a Seahawk, and I think maybe that's just because I was older when he played on the Seahawks. But he spent 5 years and 5 years apiece in Detroit and Seattle. Like, I don't know why in my brain it was like 4 years in Detroit and like 10 in Seattle. And that was
I mean, the half his tenure, you probably weren't paying attention. 2008, they went 0-16. 2009, they won 2 games. 2010, they won, I think, 4 games. And then 2011 is when, or I think they won 6 games in 2010. And then 2011 is when they got good. 2011 or 2012, they stunk again. So they were really only good for one season here, where with Seattle, you were watching them during the playoffs, maybe in the Super Bowl even. So that's probably why.
Fair enough. So you start with Cliff Averill in your four spot. Your next player is Trey Flowers.
See, I don't like where this is taking me.
It's tough.
Trey Flowers, I stand by that signing. It didn't work out, but I do think that ultimately he was like a good guy and a good leader. He just couldn't stay healthy. So he comes in his first season. And that also like is saddled with the baggage of just like being a Matt Patricia guy. So I think people hate him, or I wouldn't say hate. That's a strong word.
They don't love him.
I think people don't like him for reasons that are outside of his control. I think the Lions posted something, or he said something, and there was like a story circling on Twitter, something along those lines.
Pretty sure he was at training camp, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and everybody was like, "Did you get the money that he stole from you guys, or whatever?" Yada yada yada. Which I think is a little bit unfair because let me see. Yeah, hurt his last 2 seasons, 7 sacks in his first season. Not otherworldly, but mildly productive, which is not what they were paying him to be. So I also get why people are upset with that. I'm gonna go. I don't like this. I think I'm going to have to put him 5 because of where I position myself with Cliff Averill, but I didn't know where that would stand. Maybe you were throwing that out. I'm going to go 5.
Okay.
And hope for the best.
Your third player is Ziggy Ansah.
Ooh, okay. I'll put him at 3. He was a guy who I'm looking him up right now. And for the record, I am ranking them before I'm getting a full perspective here, or at least Ansah. I didn't necessarily do it with Trey Flowers.
I think I can reserve the right to move him before I move on to the next name.
Ezekiel Ansah's peak was pretty freaking awesome. 14.5 sacks in 2015, 12 sacks in 2017. His only problem was that he couldn't stay healthy.
He was a second-team All-Pro.
Second-team All-Pro, 5th overall pick out of BYU. Great player when healthy, but it's just some like every single year. And even when he would play, like there's some years in here kind of towards the end where he did play a decent amount of games, but he wasn't, all that productive. And it was just something where I felt like, I guess 2018 is a good example of that. 7 games, 4 sacks, just couldn't stay on the field. So I'm comfortable with putting him at 3 because I think he was ultimately a better player than Cliff Averill and Trey Flowers, at least during his time in Detroit. He just didn't get to show it as much.
You're going to be happy that your 1 and 2 slots are open, at least for this next player. Aiden Hutchinson, I imagine I know where you're going with this.
Let's go number 1 for Aiden Hutchinson. I think that's a no-brainer. Again, his peak still hasn't quite matched what Ezekiel Ansah did, but I think if you just look at his trajectory and his consistency over the last 3 seasons, like Ansah came in and 8 sacks, 7.5 sacks, then explodes for 14.5, then goes back down to 2. Whereas Hutchinson, I view as a player who's going to just deliver double digits every year, and you just know exactly what you're going to get. So the consistency combined with the peak, I think really does it for me.
So you've got your 2 spot open, sandwiched between Aiden Hutchinson and Ziggy Ansah. Are you nervous?
No, I think whoever you put here is going to be a player that is deserving it too. And I'm going to guess they're going to put in Ndamukong Suh.
No. I tried to stay away from guys who did most of their work on the interior. I know some of these guys are like kind of like Ziggy Ansah. Yeah. I know but I tried.
But Suh was a freak. He was like Aaron Donald, where it didn't even matter that he was on the interior. He was a pass rusher.
100%. I didn't have Ndamukong Suh here.
Okay.
I wish I did. I have Romeo Okwara.
Oh. Well, I'm not exactly thrilled with him being a 2, but there are certainly worse combinations. He let me look this up. So there was a year where he was actually a pivotal piece in that 2020 season. He had 10 sacks, and when they were coming back, under the Dan Campbell regime, he stuck around, and it was like, okay, this might be a dude. Like, he had his breakout season in 2020. It was his 5th year in the league, still just 25 years old. He's got in the league super young. But, when you have 10 sacks at 25 years old, I think that's really, really exciting. Unfortunately for him and unfortunately for the Lions, he just couldn't stay healthy after that. 2021, played 4 games, 1 sack. 2022, 5 games, 2 sacks. 2023, 16 games, but by that point, he was pretty much one of the last guys in the rotation, only had 2 sacks. So, yeah, don't feel great about it, but ultimately, I can live with it. If I had to do it all over again, I'd probably do Hutchinson 1, Ansah 2. I didn't even look up Cliff Avrill's stats, so let me look that up.
I think Averill 3 makes sense.
Averill 3, yeah. Averill 3, Flowers 4, and Aquara 5.
Yeah. To your point about Aquara, he just turned 30 this summer. That he wasn't even 30 until recently. Younger than Jared Goff.
And he's been retired for 2 seasons.
Right.
I don't think he officially retired until after last year. Maybe
he didn't.
Maybe
he played in 23. He did not play last year.
Yeah.
What my thinking was here was I was hoping that you were gonna put one of Cliff Averill or Trey Flowers at 3 off the bat, and you didn't. And then I was hoping that, so let's say you put Averill at 3, and I gave you Ziggy Ansah, and you're like, okay, I have to put Ziggy above Cliff. You're gonna put him at 2, and then the next one was Hutch, and I was hoping I was gonna scare you into like keeping your one spot open, and then all of a sudden you have Hutch at 4 or 5. It's not what ended up happening. I didn't fool you quite that well. But yeah.
All right, well, there we go. Like I said, come away with this ranking pretty satisfied. A few things I would change. I'd swap 2 and 5. I would even put Trey Flowers ahead of Ezekiel Ansah and Cliff Averill if I could swap. But I don't know. They Romeo Aquara, Trey Flowers had similar peaks during their time in Detroit. And I think Romeo Aquara was like a guy who kickstarted some things for this team. So I don't know. Yeah. Aquara's peak was better, 10 sacks. So I'm just talking to myself now on this podcast. But yeah, I can live with that.
No doubt.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for tuning into the Gridiron Gang podcast. We will have a new episode waiting for you after the Detroit Lions and Green Bay Packers square up at Lambeau Field. By the way, Dan Campbell saying on the 8th day the Lord created Lambeau was absolutely incredible yesterday, and I feel the same way. Super excited to go back. Great venue. If you haven't been, make it a point. It really is like a Mecca type of thing where like if you're a football fan, you just got to go and visit what is this beautiful testament to the game that we all love. So, yeah, go check out Lambeau one of these days. I can't wait to go, and we'll have a new episode on Sunday night. Thanks for listening.